Oleksandr Usyk is taking on Tyson Fury. No, he's not taking on Tyson Fury. He's taking on Daniel Dubois.
Don't do that to me, Dan. Don't do that to me.
Imagine though, or like imagine like this. That's how 2023 was feeling. That's how 2023 is moving. Like we could easily have the first ever 4-belt unification, undisputed Fury Usyk, but no, I'm blaming Fury for that.
I am too, and I think most people are. And I'm also blaming the WBC because I'm not blaming Fury for taking the fight. I'm blaming the WBC for allowing him to hold on to the belt, holding the belt hostage. And going to fight another sport, compete in another sport, while the undisputed champion, or who could be the undisputed champion, could be vying for that last belt.
Yeah, WBC's back up to their games now. They've taken away Andy Ruiz Wilder, because that they ordered that to be Tyson Fury's next mandatory, and they couldn't come up with an agreement. So now they've taken away that fight, that mandatory. So Tyson Fury hasn't had a mandatory in like 2 years. I mean, I think his last mandatory was not Chisora, but White. I know I put out a tweet and I got a lot of pushback on it. I was like, Tyson Fury's last 16 months is one fight against Derek Chisora. And I had a bunch of replies. It's like, well, if he doesn't have a mandatory, then what is he supposed to do? Like, yeah, I understand. Like he's playing with the rules, and the rules are obviously so skewed because it's boxing and there are no rules, and the WBC is more interested in making money off these fighters than actually imploring the rules. But
there's rules. There's rules for guys like Jermell Charlo, but there's not rules for Canelo or Tyson Fury.
Charlo, yeah, with the WBO, that's the problem. That there's 4 organizations running their own little schemes, and there's not one unified organization that's running down. The WBO says we're stripping Jermell Charlo the minute he steps into the ring with Canelo. You got Fury, who hasn't had a mandatory in 2 years. You got this is so frigged up. It's so messed up. But this weekend we get Oleksandr Usyk back in the ring. Anytime Usyk steps in the ring, my eyeballs are on the TV. I just think he's that good. He's that interesting. Danny Dubois, obviously not a fight we want to see, but it's still a fun fight. It's still a heavyweight fight. Dubois hits hard. I expect those early rounds to be interesting. He's much bigger than Usyk. I feel like every fighter is going to be bigger than Usyk, but this is a guy with one of the best skill sets in boxing, who's just a treat to watch, a technician in there. Also has great power, moving up from cruiserweight. There was a lot of good about Usyk. I'm just excited to see him in the ring.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm with you, Dan. And when Usyk is there, I'm watching. He's one of the best fighters in the world. He's high on a lot of pound for pound rankings, so there's another reason to tune in. But yeah, when this fight was first being talked about, I was like, oh man, Dubois is a dangerous guy. He hits hard. He's much bigger. Like all those points that you made. But then I kind of went into a deeper dive and I watched some of his recent fights and recent outings and just kind of his style and how they're going to match up. And I am not worried about Usyk anymore. And I think I think Usyk's going to stop him. I mean, okay. Dubois' punch resistance seems to have really fallen these last couple fights ever since that juggernaut loss to Joe Joyce, where he fractured his orbital. His last fight, he was fighting a relatively unknown guy from South Africa, a southpaw, mind you, and was hurt and dropped 3 times in the first round.
You want to say
very odd
Lorena?
Fight.
Was it Lorena?
Yeah, right? It was Lorena.
Yep.
Very, very odd fight. And if that is any indication of how this Usyk fight's going to go, I don't think we're going to see the 12th round.
Yeah, it's the money's pouring in on Usyk. He's a minus 1,000 favorite. Over under 7.5 rounds. I like the under there. Winning method, you can go Usyk by TKO stoppage is minus 225. There's some pretty good value there. To go to the distance, plus 260. I don't think it's going to be like a one-punch knockout for Usyk. It's going to be a systematic breakdown. It's going to be what we saw in that Joshua fight, like seemingly close fight, the second fight with Usyk and Joshua, especially Joshua having a ton of success in that 9th round. And I was like, damn, how is Usyk going to respond? He responded by landing like 50% of his punches in round 10, stepped on the gas pedal, threw the most punches from rounds like 10 through 12. So that's the type of fighter he is. He's a special fighter, man. This is like I don't want to say all-time great, but he's approaching that. If he could keep knocking off heavyweights and then ultimately beat a guy like Fury. But I expect a systematic breakdown. Maybe, do you think over 7.5 or under?
I'm thinking over. Actually, I think Dubois is big enough that he'll and I think Usyk will be cautious enough because he understands it's heavyweight punching, heavyweight boxing, and Dubois can punch. He's got a lot of knockouts in his wins. I think Usyk takes his time, breaks him down, and just kind of slow cooks him for a bunch of rounds and gets him out of there late. You mentioned that Usyk Joshua rematch. I called that fight. I called both those fights actually, but yeah, I was like, I called it like he big brothered him. So when you play a pickup basketball game with your older brother and you
Yeah.
score on him and he goes, "Oh, okay," and then he just rattles off like like 17 in a row.
Yeah.
That's how it felt like with Usyk. It's like, "Oh, you good round 9, good job, bud," and then just tore him apart the next round. And
Yeah.
that to me was a turning point for me as an Usyk observer and fan. Be like, all right, this guy really is that special of a fighter.
Yeah, good point, because there was like still a little bit of doubts from people. Like I have him in
Me
my like,
included.
yeah, I have him in my Mount Rushmore. We don't subscribe, or I don't subscribe to top 10 pound for pounds, but if you gave me the top 4 right now, I have Usyk in there.
Yep.
And I still get some pushback like, oh, this guy, he's not a true heavyweight, and who did he beat at cruiser? And all he beat is Joshua so far. Like, okay, all he beat was Joshua. We're talking about a guy that was at heavyweight his whole career and is a damn good boxer. Beat him twice and took his will away in that second one, to the point where Joshua was chucking belts out of the ring. Hip hip hooray!
You also forget Joshua fought a really good second fight.
Yeah, awesome fight.
He looked great in that fight, and he just got outmanned.
That was the best. I audibly laughed when when he gave that whole speech, the hip hip hooray. How did I lose to someone like you? Threw the belts, and then you were like, "Well, that was weird."
I think I said bizarre. It's like, well, that was bizarre.
I was like, wow, Algieri, I want to bring him on my podcast and make him my permanent co-host after that.
That was one of those situations where I'm as befuddled as everyone else watching it in live, and then I forget that I have a mic in front of me that everyone can hear.
Bro, that's why you're the best. Where anyone else would be like, like if it was Tony Bellew and Matchroom guys, they'd be told that they would be like, yeah, okay, Joshua, that's what you should have done. Like Tony Bellew has come out and said, like, I don't know if I could call his fights, or who was it? I think it was Carl Frampton said that, because Bellew said that Joshua has as much power, if not more, than Wilder. And because they're friends, it's hard to call fights that, it's hard to call a fight of your friend. And I think it was Carl Frampton came out and said, listen, like maybe they shouldn't do it. Maybe you shouldn't. Tony Bellew was like, don't call Joshua's fights anymore since you guys are friends, because you're not calling it true.
I have a lot of relationships with a lot of fighters that I call, and you just have to be, it depends. Some people are more emotional than others. If you just cut that out and kind of do what you do, do the work in front of you, call what you see. I get messages all the time. Oh, I like your commentary because you're not biased, and and I'm still calling guys that I know, but I'm calling what I see, and I know that's what my job is, and I don't have an agenda. I don't care who wins any of these fights. Even people when I know, I just kind of shut that version off. Like a judge, you're supposed to be unbiased. Right. It's hard to do, but yeah, you got to tuck your emotions away.
It is hard. And even when I on the lower level, when I see a fighter that fought on the card on MVP, he's on the flight with me, and he's like, who do you think won? He lost the fight. And I was like, yeah, I honestly thought you lost. You fought close, but you lost. What's the point of me gassing him up and being like, oh, you won that fight, man. You won, just because it's an awkward conversation. Like, no, you got to be straight up, and they got to learn from it, even at the highest levels. Back to Usyk at the heavyweight. 4 fights at heavyweight. He's starting to that's crazy. He's starting to build up that resume at heavyweight. He's only throwing 52 punches around, Chris. He was throwing 70 at cruiser. So we're starting to see, remember there was a lot of questions about how he would fight as a heavyweight. Will he be bouncing around in there as a smaller guy? He's put on a ton of mass. Like I saw a picture of him in 2018 as a cruiser to now. Like he's put on the mass. He looks like a heavyweight. He's slowed down a little bit in terms of volume, which is probably good for his gas tank. 51 punches around, still landing 43% of his power shots. Still throwing that jab out there. Defense is amazing. His opponent's only landing 9 punches per round. So the guy is a dynamo. He's so damn good, and I can't wait to watch him fight. We'll see if Dubois can bring a fight to him, but I think our official pick is late stoppage, over 7.5 stoppage. There's your official pick for us in that heavyweight fight.